So, Pokemon Presents is coming on Pokemon Day, February 27th at 6 a.m. Pacific Time, strangely announced really late at night here in the US. But, of course, that means we gotta sit down and talk about it. Ahoy, folks, and welcome to another GameXplain discussion. I am your host, Tris. I am joined by Don, and we're gonna give our thoughts and predictions on next week's Pokemon Presents. So, this is a really interesting time, because we've been in Gen 9 for a while. You know, we had Scarlet and Violet. Scarlet and Violet came out, and then we had last year's Pokemon Presents where the big thing was DLC for Scarlet and Violet, and now that's all done too. So we're in that nice period now of what's coming next. So, how are you feeling about this right now, Dom?
It is interesting, right? Because we're in such an interesting period of the Pokemon cycle where we're just in the middle of what would be considered a gen.
Right.
But obviously, for us, this is a different experience post-COVID because Sword and Shield was basically mostly set in COVID. So a lot of the regular events that would have led to a next generation really didn't happen. So this is like the first time we are back in a regular cycle. And for the majority, let alone some issues with the actual video game this generation is attached to, it's been pretty good. Like, I've enjoyed myself really with it. And it's one of the more intriguing ones, both from the TCG perspective, but also from the anime perspective, to transition to a new anime. It's been up and down. It's been really interesting. But it makes me, like, think where we are in that cycle, specifically. Or what we're getting. I don't think we'll get a new gen this year.
No.
For sure. It's way too soon for that. But what is like the game that will bridge that gap, basically? Because they obviously need to release a game some point this year.
Of course,
regardless of what it really is. Yeah. And my honest opinion is like it needs to be some sort of remake or remastering of something. And it's basically like 3 ideas on my mind. One of them is Black and White, which doesn't seem like it's now the time and the place for it. But at the same time, you never know.
It's weird, because it's only been 3 years since BDSP, and there was a long time between Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire before them.
Yeah.
You know, obviously you could probably count Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee in between, in which case the gap gets bridged down a little bit in terms of remakes.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gen 5, I think in general, is very likely to be here as some sort of revisit. I don't know if that means a BDSP style remake of Black and White or like a Legends game going over there. But they've kind of been building up to and doing things with Unova for a while over the last few years. Even the original Pokemon Legends had a lot of Unova influence. Like, you had like whole characters from Unova or references to characters in Unova. And then in Gen 9 with Paldea, you know, Paldea was its own region, but of the DLCs, both DLCs kind of took you somewhere different. And the Indigo Disc was set in Unova. It's not an area you can go to in Gen 5, but it is set in Unova. So it feels like they've been building up to doing something with that region. Especially since one of the Pokemon Day celebrations happening this year is they're lighting up the Empire State Building in New York for Pokemon Day. They've never done that before, as far as I know, and considering Unova's meant to be like New York City, that's a little telling to me.
It is interesting, isn't it? Honestly, I think that is the best outcome out of. Like, there's also like this really weird wrinkle in the back of my mind saying, hey, you know what also could be a possibility? Another Let's Go game.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of thinking that too, actually. Like, that's also funny. Like, the other one that's been really tossed around a bit is Johto, Gen 2.
Yeah.
And I know it's been some years since Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. We could always get a Let's Go, I don't know, Pichu and Togepi, or whatever they want to call it, but a Let's Go for Johto. But whether it's that, or maybe that's a BDSP style remake if Gen 5 is a Legend, or whatever they end up doing, this also feels like they've been building up to it in some way. In the last 6 months, the Pokemon team has been going all out on like marketing Johto. Like, there's been a lot of like fashion collaborations and like collaborations promoting Johto and like the 3 starters from that region. And then of course, back on the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC comment, the first part of it, Kitakami, is very, like very culturally Japan. That's pretty much Johto.
Yeah. It's either or, right? Like, it's not gonna be both. Let's be frank here. It's an either or direction.
Mm-hmm.
The pessimistic part of me says nothing feels right now. I think Johto Let's Go makes a lot of sense.
Uh-huh.
On the other hand, like, the more optimistic side of me says, but Gen 5 though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My problem with Gen 5 though is the fact that, because you have 2 sets of it, you have Black and White and you have Black 2 and White 2, and yes. I wouldn't want the sequels to be left out of that. Like, they're so important to that, and I don't know how I would feel if they go, all right, BDSP style remake, Ilka remake of Black and White, and a year down the line, Black and White 2. Like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that.
That early game of original Black and White is really rough. It's really rough to get good Pokemon in that, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like unlike BDSP, which hot take, I was completely fine with.
Me too.
I enjoyed it, actually. Yeah.
Me too, honestly.
Yeah. But you have a good selection of Pokemon like very early on in that game, which makes the flow a lot better. I think early Black and White has an issue where you don't get enough Pokemon. And I get where they're coming from, right? Like, they were going for the fact that you only would see new Pokemon in the first few routes.
Right.
But it also made it the problem. Like, you have nothing to really grasp onto.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those issues were heavily resolved in Black and White too.
Yeah, that's true. But it's not like something they can remake Black and White but take a bunch of influence from Black 2 and White 2, because it's
either or.
They're different stories. They build off each other. Like, you can't bring, for example, you can't just bring Black and White 2. You can't do that. You need one. And I feel like if you're going to do one, that means 2 has to happen at some point, or if not, that just sucks. But
oh yeah.
So, which is why I feel like Gen 5 might actually be the Legends take, so they don't have to choose between the 2, and they do something like new with it.
It would make sense. Obviously, it's a different type of game. I'm not sure how long it's a game like to build.
Right.
Because it's a very different type of Pokemon game, and obviously with more of a remaster or remake, you have a blueprint you can basically build on.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, honestly, still worked on the DLC. So if there are a multiple pipeline studio, which they are not that big,
right?
I wonder how that would turn out in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tricky. Like, I'm sitting here hoping whatever they announce that's like traditional Pokemon style, it doesn't feel rushed. Please, Pokemon.
I remember that they said that it would update this game to make the performance better.
I don't know. Maybe that's where the rumors of games working better on the Switch 2 comes from. Maybe they opted for that instead.
That's an interesting idea. Let's see if it works out.
They would need to do more than just enhance the hardware, unfortunately, to make that run better. Anyway, So we pose a lot of ideas for both Gen 2 and 5 specifically, and this would just be like the highlight of the show. There's plenty of other things here that we still going to talk about, but
for sure,
between Legends Gen 5, or I guess even Legends Gen 2, or a BDSP style remake of either game, or a Let's Go for, I guess, primarily Gen 2, what would you feel more excited to see if any of these ones came true?
You mentioned a brand new idea. I have to even consider Legends of Gen 2. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my god, that would be tasty because it fits so well with that style.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god. No, ultimately, maybe seeing Unova at an earlier stage would excite me the most because we haven't really had any reference for that.
Right.
So that would be really cool to see. Honestly, the good thing about Pokemon on Switch is that every game has felt different.
True, it has.
Like, no Pokemon game of the mainline series on Switch has felt the same, which is frankly a good thing, because there's different tastes for different people.
Mm-hmm.
This would be the first time they revisited one of the styles they've done before.
You're right. If they did another Legends.
If they did another Legends, if they did another PDSP.
Or Let's Go.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, it's going to be a very tricky situation in that sense, because people have like already preset expectations of whatever they're going to do.
Right.
But ultimately, like, Legends would excite me the most. That being said, I would be okay with just some sort of remake of Gen 5, taking your problems into account that the first game had.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if they would.
That's fair. Yeah, it's... I think the remake style for Gen 5, I think, is the hardest one on here, just because there's so many ways it could be done wrong.
Yeah.
There's so many ways it could be done, and you look at it and it's like, well, I'd rather just go play the original. Whereas I think Gen 2, there's a lot they could do that people would just be happy with. Well, people will complain at whatever happens.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I do think with, like, going for a Let's Go game in the Gen 2 style, the problem is that game is quite gigantic. And the way they remaked Kanto felt like big in, like, setup. Because there were a lot of pathways you could go, and it felt a lot bigger because the way that the game was designed, basically, and how Pokemon would spawn into the world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how much of a task that would be doing that for 2 separate regions and also changing the buildings in Kanto appropriately.
Well, I mean, they have had quite a few years to potentially figure that out, so that one would have had the longest amount of time to be cooking in the oven there. So it's possible.
Sure.
It's possible they got that one worked out. Here's an idea that just came to mind too, since we've been mentioning like the BDSP style remakes. So if you look at the Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl remake by Ilka as, essentially recapturing that DS era sprite work there, that DS era art style into a 3D set. What actually comes to mind next for that style is literally just taking the same as that art style and working with it further to do Heart Gold and Soul Silver remakes specifically for Gen 2. Because that was like the next games right after Diamond and Pearl, or after Platinum. But so that I think that could. That doesn't feel impossible to me.
It definitely doesn't feel impossible. I'm just wondering how the majority of people would feel about it. Ultimately, for me, it's fine. Like, having more straight up remasters of games that I already enjoy, that's completely fine. I think the main issue for people felt that there was not really any platinum content in those games.
Yeah.
And obviously with Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you would alleviate that problem because those 2 games are distinctively have some unique features between them. But you can still get most of the stuff that you really want out of the game, regardless of which one you pick.
Right. No, exactly. But I do think there's something there with how those were the games right after Diamond and Pearl, and they pulled a lot from those games. And even if you look at how they handled BDSP, like certain areas where your partner Pokemon can follow you, and like different like costumes and different things that they did in those games that I kind of think they could apply to Gen 2 if they specifically chose to remake Heart Gold, Soul Silver. Or they probably wouldn't say they're remaking those ones specifically. They would probably just say they're remaking Gold and Silver, but you would probably see the most influence from Heart Gold.
Could you imagine if they didn't include the routes that are specific to Heart Gold and Soul Silver, though?
Well, that would certainly make a lot of people upset.
Like, that would be, like, my main issue already immediately from the get-go. Oh, you call it Gold and Silver, that's cute. Are there roots from Heart Gold and Soul Silver in there? No? Oh, okay.
Oh, boy. I did think we're on the right track, though, with something of Gen 2. Potentially, because the music, the little like tease that they gave us for this Pokemon Presents is specifically playing like classic Pokemon music from like the Game Boy Color. And it does have some people wondering if instead of a remake of a game from that era, if we'll finally see NSO for like Gen 1 or 2.
I mean, I had it on my list too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did think from maybe this is the time for some NSO stuff. The main problem is I don't know what Nintendo's NSO strategy is at all. Like it feels so random and all over the place. Yeah. There's no rhyme or reason for it how games get released on there. And we haven't had a proper schedule for any of these games for a long time.
Yeah.
It would be nice to have some certainty of what's coming. Maybe they drop it the same day. I don't know.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. There's typically something every month. It's not been consistent as to which thing it's for, mind you, but there's something every month. We haven't had something for February yet. I believe we had Golden Sun at the end of January. So we haven't had something for February yet. And they're usually announced Thursday nights. If there isn't one announced this Thursday night, I'm then convinced that we're going to see something NSO. We're going to see something NSO with the Pokemon Presents, and it might even drop same day.
Could be. I also have the fake feeling that maybe there's something in the partner direct. Who knows? It could be either or, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sort of tricky part with that. But ultimately, you know, there needs to be something big on a Game Boy NSO. I feel that it has been sort of silent. And last year we did get Trading Card Game, which is a very, very good game.
And we also got the Pokemon Stadium games.
Pokemon Stadium games, yes. Yeah. Although playing that without rental Pokemon is an interesting problem, especially in Stadium 2. Have fun with the Gym Leader Castle. But no, ultimately I do think there's some sort of thing in the works regarding those games.
Yeah.
But it's hard, you know, because for the Pokemon Company, like, making games and building a strategy around it is their virtue. So just dropping those on NSO without any fanfare seems also kind of wrong. So I don't think they would drop right away. If they're coming out, they will likely wait a month and then build it up until the moment they come out.
I could see that. Yeah. I could definitely see that. Unless the fanfare is, you know, in the present, you know, here it is, right now. Although I would be surprised if they drop it on the actual, like, NSO service, like as is. Just because I feel like they would want to find a way to still sell it to you specifically. Like, sell you specifically Pokemon.
I think if you do that, then you have to also have the dual punch of, hey, this is what's coming next later in the year.
Yeah.
This is a holdover, have fun.
I could see that. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. No, watch. We're completely off base, and what they're going to do is, Hey You Pikachu is dropping on NSO.
Hey You Pikachu barely released in some parts of the world, so, you know.
So it would be something. It's just probably not what everybody's looking for.
They're going to do a Pokemon Channel remake.
Oh, man. Actually, you know what? That actually raises a question. The Pokemon TV service is ending soon.
It's true, yeah.
Could we see something, like some sort of replacement for that, or some sort of, like, new version of it show up here?
No.
No?
No, the replacement is subscribe to a bunch of video on-demand services.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And it's so... In every country, it's so radically different, too.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I have no good way of watching our local dub of the black and white anime.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so segmented and over the place that it doesn't make much sense as a strategy. It would be better to have it all together in a singular app, because the story has now concluded. You don't have that much, in that sense, not much news to sell. But they're like, no.
Oh, man. I mean, like, the problem is it would make too much sense, therefore they won't do it.
Everything makes too much sense.
Yeah, right? No, I mean, so, working on shows, though, I do think we'll see some sort of presence for shows here. Like, they might reiterate the announcement they just made yesterday of Pokemon Concierge is getting another season, or, you know, more episodes, I guess is the better way to phrase that one. They might reiterate that there. Has Pokemon Horizons dropped outside of Japan yet? I remember it was supposed to, and then it got delayed. I don't remember when it got delayed to.
So, it dropped in multiple countries. For example, there are already tons of English episodes that were broadcast on Canadian television.
Oh, okay.
Like, they were the first English-speaking country that got it, I think.
Got it, okay.
Yeah. Then the UK just recently announced it would be available on BBC iPlayer, which is a free service. So, you know. But yeah, for every country, the way they distribute it is sort of different. It's interesting. For example, if you try to watch it on Netflix, we never get the Japanese dub of those.
Wow.
Like, they resolutely say, yeah, you don't get the Japanese dub of it.
Oh, not allowed.
Yeah. Which I'm sure some anime fans are thrilled about.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
No, but I do think we'll see something with their shows. I don't know if they'll have some sort of new special thing in the works again this year, some new special show that they'll announce, but they could do something.
They haven't done a movie in a while, huh?
Oh, it's true. It has been a while since they did a movie, because all the movies had, like, Ash, and Ash is done now, so.
Well, The Power of Us and I Choose You was like that alternate version of Ash.
Right.
Which was also like the episode post Journeys was also about.
Mm-hmm.
They might do something with that alternate version of Ash at some point. That seems like reasonable to me.
That's true. They could do something with that, or they could do some sort of movie based on the Horizons cast. I think that's the new show. Like the you know, something with the new cast in the new show with Palpatine.
I mean, with the anime, right? It's like recently we've been seeing that Netflix is dumping a lot of money in multiple anime projects.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did like a short form series with alternate universe Ash.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
I wouldn't be shocked by that.
No, that doesn't sound too surprising to me either, actually. Yeah, I could definitely see something along those lines.
Yeah.
Well, one other thing that we're probably going to see a lot of here, Netflix reminded me, because Netflix has a whole like game service thing, a mobile games block. Because let's be real, they almost always open these things with 10 minutes or so of updates on all of our mobile games. So we'll probably get more Paldean trainers coming to Pokemon Masters, and at least one new Pokemon revealed for Pokemon Unite.
There haven't been any Paldean trainers and Pokemon Masters at all so far. So
there's been a few. They have Nimona, Penny,
Iono.
Iono and Grusha, but they only have those ones, I think. So there
should be more.
Yeah, there should be more. Not even Arvin is there. Like they'll probably, actually Arvin is probably who they're gonna announce specifically, and then like Silhouette, a few other important trainers. We'll probably get at least one new Pokemon for Pokemon Unite. I'd be shocked if there wasn't.
I mean, alternatively, the new season starts that same day.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So at the very least, they'll talk about the new season starting then. They'll probably have at least one new event for Pokemon Cafe Remix. I don't really keep up with that one that much, but I know they talk about it a lot.
That's the only one I don't keep up of, and that's for a very specific reason.
What's the reason?
The reason is,
And I think we'll also get some sort of mention of an upcoming event or new Pokemon coming to Pokemon Sleep. Since that's been doing pretty well, so.
Yeah, with Pokemon Sleep, it's interesting because literally the Good Sleep Day is literally just before that.
Yep.
So they would have to mention something very specific, like, because I just dropped a new region as well, so there's not much in that sense to really announce for Pokemon Sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It would specifically have to be like an event.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if it was some sort of event, during this event, you can get these Pokemon more, or like this brand new Pokemon coming during that time frame, something like that.
For sure.
So I think all those updates won't take like too long, but it'll probably be like the first 10 minutes of the show, and everyone's gonna be like, okay, I don't play these games. So
it is interesting because we mentioned a bunch of Johto before. There aren't that many Johto Pokemon in Pokemon Unite.
would be a good time to get some.
Unova either. There are not many Unova Pokemon either.
I
So that
definitely
would be a good
feel
setup
like-
for either of them.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Pokemon Unite has kind of been leaning into recent releases for how they pick their Pokemon based on like some level of relevancy. Not only, obviously, but
Paldea only has one Pokemon.
yeah,
so far.
but yeah, like exactly. Paldea only has one.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
do think that they're looking at recent releases as like ways to kind of keep an eye on, like what's popular right now? Who could we add right now?
I think it will be a good tie-in though. Like if they do something specifically to either region, then doing something Unite would make a lot of sense.
It would. It would. It would kind of be like the best time to do so.
Yeah.
So we talked main games, we talked mobile games, we talked shows and other little events, but one thing we haven't talked on yet are other spin-offs. You know, like spin-offs like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon or Pokemon Snap and a bunch of other different ones. Do we think we'll see the reveal of a new spin-off? Either a completely new spin-off or like a remake of one or a new entry in there.
I say this every time I do one of these bring back Pokemon Picross, you cowards. That was the
Been a
best
long
Pokemon
time.
spin-off. It was the best spin-off on 3DS. I played it a ton, and it had a good rhythm to it, so I really enjoyed that. And they did bring it. Did they bring it to? I don't think they brought it to mobile. It was only on 3DS.
Yeah, I don't think that ended up on mobile.
Yeah, it was only on 3DS, and it was pretty late in the 3DS cycle too. So that would be nice to bring it to another place.
Yeah.
Please. But outside of that, it's interesting because last year obviously we got Detective Pikachu Returns, and I don't think it was the return that people have to hope for.
No, far from, I think.
Far from it, yeah. When I was in Japan, and this is just a complete side note, it was very cheap because people were just buying it for the Pokemon card that you got in Japan for it.
Ooh, wow.
So you got a new copy that was basically sealed for 1,500 yen.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah. But yeah, when it comes to spin-offs, it's hard to say, you know. Like, the honest answer is like, I don't expect it to, but it would be nice for a new Pokemon Mystery Dungeon.
Ooh.
Because the majority of stuff we've kind of had. Like, we had a new Pokemon Snap, which is the thing we wanted for years.
Yep.
And I was completely fine with that game. I enjoyed it. Pikachu Returns now out of the door. It's not the thing we wanted, but it's still a thing nonetheless.
Yep.
And the only thing we really got from the Mystery Dungeon front was a remake.
Yeah.
And the people who developed those games are still actively in business. They're not gone or anything. And literally, they're bringing out a game very soonish on Switch, I think. The new Zero and the Wanderer. So it's technically possible. I don't expect it to because they just released the game. At the same time, I also think it's the only thing that would make really the most sense as it comes from a fan perspective, because that's the thing that people really want to play and want something new of.
Yeah. Especially since we only had the remake of it. But since we had the remake of it, they now have like a functioning system for it on Switch if they wanted to use that as a base for a new game.
For sure. Yeah. I cannot think anything else particularly that they could make that would... And a surprise is always welcome. Like, we don't know if something is brand new, then a surprise obviously is always welcome. Like, do something new with the setup of your franchise. That's always a good thing. But as in terms of, like, things we actually know, it's kind of hard to say. Like, I could throw something out there, and I know for a fact it won't happen, is Poke Park. Give me a new Poke Park, for example. I love the Poke Park games. The second was amazing. Do I expect a new one to happen? Absolutely freaking not. But I will sing its praises for it every single day.
I mean, I'm kind of with you there on a similar note, specifically for Pokemon Ranger. That game would not function well off of a DS, but dang, I want another one.
I mean, you can build something around it. They did it with a lot of different games over this last generation that we wouldn't expect to have on Switch.
That's true.
So it's very well possible to build a new system around it, but yeah, you're right.
It's very unlikely, yeah. But yeah. So we both have unrealistic wants and expectations, or predictions rather, for spin-offs. But
yeah,
I do think just because they've already done one on Switch as a remake, Mystery Dungeon might stand the best chance in terms of And in terms of existing Pokemon spin-offs, I think Mystery Dungeon stands the best chance to either get a brand new entry or remake another one. Just because they
100%.
already have the systems there.
No, 100%. To me, it's like it's what I said at the beginning. Like Pokemon is a very interesting place right now because it feels like a full-on transition period.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, what is the one thing that would bring like individual excitement separated from like the main games? I think Mystery Dungeon holds the best chance in that regard. But it's hard to say, you know. It's also like, how much resources do you still want to spend right now?
Yeah.
Because like there's a good chunk of people that know whenever the next system is coming, and you want to go full force on that. But the Pokemon Company usually goes to his own drum. So ultimately, they could go full hard next week, or they could just decide, no, we'll keep it minimal and we'll see you next year.
Yeah, it's true. It's tough to say, because especially since we're in that period where the sequel to the Switch, the successor to the Switch, I should say, is coming at some point, seemingly now next year. It's possible that this year won't have as much because things are being made for that, and that's not coming until next year now. So, you know, we'll have to be waiting for that. Like, it's entirely possible there won't be that much, even from Pokemon, because they're all being made for the next thing. I think there'll be at least a spin-off this year, or like at least a smaller scale, like remake or something. But yeah, it's possible this Pokemon Presents won't be anything like super duper exciting, which would be unfortunate. But maybe maybe Pokemon could take like a little bit of a break. They won't suffer that much.
It would be fine, but you know, Pokemon never really takes a break, and that's also the realistic expectations of things.
Exactly, because the IP is always thriving.
I mean, their card releases are going super hard right now. Like, and I play the TCG actively, so for me, keeping up is always like a hassle.
Yeah.
Because, for example, like this week we have the cards that they released in the TCG Classic box, those free promo cards, are now coming into a separated box that you can then actually use in decks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is called the Combined Power Box, which is coming out this Friday. So just before Pokemon Day.
Okay, that's interesting. I was gonna ask if there was a chance of any like new big TCG news to show up here, but
I think they're gonna mostly just focus on temporal forces. Because for people who are not in the know about TCG, a regulation is coming up, which means that there is going to be a big pivot. And I think that big pivot really is going to be that, in terms of TCG, is that half of the cards that are currently available in Sword and Shield are no longer be usable. Yeah. Which means it's going to be the last half of Sword and Shield, and then currently everything that's currently in the Scarlet and Violet generation. And the second half of that Temporal Forces has a lot of the cards that people are going to actively use. A card version that's going to come back is called A-Spec, which is an item card that you can only have one of in your deck. Which is going to be add a new strategy layer to that entirety of that game. So that's the thing that most people are sort of waiting for at the moment.
Okay.
But it's also not only just where regulations are going to change in the TCG, it's also in Pokemon Go, where there's also an active community of people battling. People are kind of hoping with Pokemon Presents that, for example, for Miraidon and Koraidon are coming in raids, because that would add a new layer to that as well.
Yeah.
But we haven't heard anything particular about that, so there will also be a thing that could drop during Pokemon Presents.
Definitely. So, and that feels like something they would drop during a Presents specifically.
Yeah. So there's like two sides of it. It's like the Pokemon video game side that are looking forward to what is next, but there's also like the TCG and Pokemon Go side that are actively looking at what the new regulation really brings. And for that, it's like the next set and then the regulation. And for Pokemon Go, it's like having more Pokemon available to you to use in your next team.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll talk about, since you mentioned like everything with the regulations and all, do you think they'll talk about the Pokemon Championships? That's not until like the summer, so they may not, or would they?
Yeah, I mean, with the announcement of where it is going, it was very interesting to see that reaction already, to be honest. But I mean, they have to mention at some point. Obviously, it's not quite the season for that. It's more international season.
Yeah.
So the one in Europe and America, which is like where Unite, Go, TCG, and VGC are being played, and it's like the lead up to the World Championships.
Okay.
So for me, like, they're likely more focused on like the internationals for North America and Europe. But it wouldn't be shocked if they mentioned offhand a little bit about the World Championships.
That makes sense. Well, we've gone through all my notes. So, any last thoughts or like out of nowhere predictions that for next week's Pokemon Presents?
No, I think we covered most bases here.
Yeah?
To be honest.
Yeah. I think we covered a lot of avenues, and I think I'm slightly worried. I got myself more hyped up for this than I should be, but I do think there'll be something nice here at the very least.
There should be at least something that grabs our interest. It cannot be much, but if it's at least one thing, that's already a win, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not everything needs to be groundbreaking.
I mean, regardless of what is being announced, somewhere in the community, you can hear the complaints coming in slowly into the ether.
I don't know about slowly, but we'll see. We'll see what happens on Pokemon Day. But I'm sure we'll be back on Pokemon Day. I imagine we'll probably be streaming the Direct, or the Presents, I should say. Or we might be doing a discussion afterwards. But yeah, so clearly we're going to be busy with Pokemon here next week. And I look forward to seeing what there is. Don, I hope we get to reconvene and actually talk about what is or what isn't there. And we'll see what happens. But with that, that's going to do it for our predictions discussion. Stay tuned to GameXplain for plenty more on Pokemon, because there's going to be a lot next week, we hope. And other things gaming as well, of course. But until next time, farewell everyone.